The first reading is taken from James chapter 1, verses 16 to 21. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. This is the word of the Lord.
Now, before children head over to St. Monica's, we're going to spend a bit of time thinking. And the second reading is 1 Peter chapter 1, beginning to read at verse 23. For you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and enduring word of God. For all people are like grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever. And this is the word that was preached to you. Therefore, rid yourselves of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. What's fascinating about those two readings from James chapter 1 and 1 Peter chapter 1 is that in many ways Peter and James draw the same sort of conclusions in the end, but from really polar opposite reasons. Both of those readings are concerned about what you might call our character and the way that we treat each other. And both of them present that very strongly. In 1 Peter, rid yourselves of all malice and all deceit. In James chapter 1, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent. They're both interested in their own ways in, if you like, our characters being changed for the better. But they both, if you like, get there from very different places. We've already seen in James, from the fact of God being the giver of all good things, that this world is charged with the grandeur of God, and so there's goodness and beauty and everywhere around you. And yet 1 Peter, its logic, if you like, its reasoning is very, very different. Getting to the rid yourselves of all malice, only halfway through the passage, the first part is all about how ephemeral life is, how finite. All people are like grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. So James argues from the goodness of creation, Peter from the temporary nature of it. How do they get to the same sort of place at the end? I want to suggest that as you think about that question, the goodness and the finiteness or full temporariness of creation, actually there is a sort of perspective that holds those two things together, and that helps us as we, in the midst of this special bank holiday weekend, reflect on what happened yesterday, the meaning of the coronation of King Charles. Many people say that the monarchy is like a mirror to the nation. So in one sense, this is a sort of weekend of national self-reflection, maybe even national navel-gazing. Who are we? And so on. All of us will see different things in the midst of all that. But there are three I think, ground-level truths to help us make sense of what's going on in our country at the moment, in our own lives. 3 things I want to share about the monarchy and about the nation that it mirrors to us. First of all, it's good. Some of us will be tempted to receive everything about the king and the queen and the coronation with a sort of sideways look. What's really going on here? Perhaps we're aware of how monarchy is a kind of hangover of absolutist power. Does it really have a place in modern Britain? Perhaps we're aware of how the monarchy, kings and queens, are bound up with empire and with the legacy of colonialism. And it's not that any of those perspectives are sort of invalid and we shouldn't talk about them. But taking that James reading, first of all, every good and perfect gift is from above, from the Father, who does not change like shifting shadows. If that basic truth that Christianity claims is true, then our first call in everything in the world is to find the good that there is there. To do that uncynically and to say, God, you're a giver of good things. Now, that could easily become a kind of glib call. You know, the equivalent of saying, well, the thing about Mussolini, the trains ran on time. Don't know if that was actually true about Mussolini's Italy, but it's one of those things that people often say. There's a Michelin Webb comedy sketch where Admiral Dönitz takes over from Adolf Hitler as the leader of Germany for all of 5 minutes. And he says, we've got to have some, let's really work on the autobahns. That was a good thing that we did. And obviously the comedy is, well, come on, this is the Nazi regime. There's nothing good to say about it. Move on. So when I'm saying to receive the monarchy as a good thing, that is not meant to sound a glib claim. It is to respond, I think, to what it means that the God who is the creator of everything there is and the sustainer of everything there is has given us in this country this particular constitutional arrangement with a monarchy. If he is the creator of everything, then the universe is charged with the grandeur of him being the creator. His fingerprints are everywhere, and he has given us this particular arrangement for this particular time. And unless we want to say that it is sort of evil from top to bottom and needs to be sort of completely overturned, then we can find the good in it and celebrate it uncynically. And actually, as we consider what it means to have this particular monarchy in this particular way, then perhaps you, if you watched the coronation yesterday, heard and saw the way that Christian kingship as service was threaded through the entire service. That is always a battle to put into practice. You look at the history of Christian kings, and you'll find that those kings, and it's almost always kings, have almost universally failed to embody the high ideals of what it means to be a Christian king using their power to serve. But at its heart, there is captured in that idea of a Christian king following in the footsteps of Jesus Christ himself and using power for the blessing and service of others. And wherever we come from this morning, whatever our sort of instincts are about the monarchy, it seems to be that is a good and a right thing to celebrate and give thanks for on a day like today. So first of all, monarchy is good, but secondly, it's temporary. And that's the perspective of 1 Peter, I think. That quote in 1 Peter, it is a quote, you see it's got quotation marks, it's from the book of Isaiah, the prophecy of Isaiah. And Isaiah was writing at a time when Israel had a monarchy, and it was a big deal, and people celebrated it. And yet, Isaiah can still say, and Peter can still quote bravely and confidently, all people are like grass. All their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of the Lord endures forever. I've loved over the past few years here at St. Bartholomew's when we've let some of the garden grow as wildflowers. And they spring up and they're beautiful. But it's not too far into the year when they all wither and die and go and return back and we get the grass again. But even the grass itself eventually gives out. If you don't get rain on it, in the end, it withers and dies. Particularly for Peter and for Isaiah, living in a far different climate from ours. They would know the way that deserts suddenly bloom into color and life and then disappear again. And they use that very image to talk about not just Christian kings, but in fact, all the glory of all human beings. And that is an enormous challenge and brings, if you like, a very different perspective to this weekend, to the events in Westminster Abbey yesterday. Part of what gives the coronation, and in fact the monarchy as a whole, meaning, and you might say sacredness, is that sense of connection with ancient roots. A very, 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 very old chair with a very, very, very old stone underneath it. Those swords, those carriages, those words, those rites, those oaths. Part of what the point of all of that is to say, this is an ancient institution. You might even say has the feeling of eternity about it. And they do imbue a coronation service with great meaning and emotion. But I suppose the warning from 1 Peter, drawing on Isaiah, is something like this. Don't let all that trick you. Don't let all that kind of convince you that there is in the monarchy in the end something of eternal significance. Because all people are like grass and all their glory is like the flowers of the field, like the wildflowers in the garden. As long-lasting and forever standing as anything in the world looks, it isn't. It seems to me that sort of longing for things that are permanent and stable, not just about coronations in the end, that is what the human heart is desperate for. We're looking everywhere we can to find that thing that sort of grounds everything else, that sort of ballast for our souls in the end. That's eternal. That's where true, deep meaning is found. You see it at this sort of edge moments of life, around the times of funerals and so on, where there is this deep sense of, on the one hand, wanting to give thanks for the person who's died, but also saying that can't be the end of their existence. It can't be that they're just gone and there's nothing left of them. So we reach out and try and grab onto something. Is there a legacy of theirs that will carry on? Are they somehow not gone but still with us? Because the truth that the grass withers and the flowers fall is too much to take with those we love most. You see it, I think, as well in particularly sort of the past 10 or so years in TV series that deliberately take you through time. We don't just have sort of EastEnders following families across sort of, as it were, the present. But increasingly, a sort of style of TV series is to jump back and forth through time. And even that very simple plot device of telling someone's backstory or telling someone's future story often is where the emotional heft of a TV series kind of comes from. And the point of it, I think, is that if you have that sense of someone's life, someone's meaning, not being limited to their 80 years and 10, somehow it has deeper weight, deeper significance. But here's the point, it's all a fiction. I mean, in the case of a TV series, deliberately so, a fiction. So the call, if you like, of 1 Peter is to say, yes, these are gifts that God gives, but hold them with an open hand because they're temporary. It's been said, I don't know if it's actually true, but I read it in a book once, that when a Roman general came into Rome to experience his triumph, to be celebrated as some conquering hero of the Gauls or whatever, he would be led into Rome with his army behind him, and everyone would be out to cheer and celebrate, but they put a slave next to him in his chariot. and the slave would stand there and whisper in the Roman general's ear, "Memento mori." Remember that you will die. It was the Romans' way of saying, don't get too big for your boots. Don't think that you're something special. Of course you are something special, but you are only a mortal. Perhaps there was something of that. I don't know if it was intended, but I certainly felt like it at the start of the service in Westminster Abbey when a chorister came and welcomed the king and welcomed him in the name of the King of Kings. And that welcoming the name of the King of Kings doesn't just, if you like, validate Charles as a king. It does something more subtle, I think, more sort of subversive. It says something like this: you're not the highest authority around here. There is a king who is higher than you, to whom you will one day be called to account. Your kingship is temporary. Remember the Queen's funeral. All those bits of regalia that were given to Charles were handed back. Christian burials were unique in the ancient world because the Christians weren't surrounded by their grave goods. In the end, it's just you before God. Now that presents a different spin, a different take, if you like, on all that we saw yesterday. To say in one sense it is both a good gift we celebrate and also fleeting, like grass, as temporary, as permanent as it appears. How do we put those two things together? Last point, very briefly. Not only is monarchy good and temporary, but it is also a shadow of something both better and lasting. And that, in the end, is a perspective that draws Peter and James together, though they start from different places. 1 Peter contrasts all that is ephemeral and finite and temporary with something that will stand forever. The word of the Lord, as the quotation from Isaiah puts it, and the church, the people that is built, is produced as that word is preached to you. And that, in the end, is why Peter is concerned about those things. Get rid of all malice and all deceit. They're things that get in the way of our relationships as people built together by the word of God. That's why James is concerned about getting rid of all moral filth, because your relationships in the church matter because they're eternal. All the glory will go up in smoke. But the way that you relate as the church, the friendships you make now will carry on forever because they are, in the end, the building that Jesus is building, the community that Jesus is making. Our longings for eternity, whether we express it in our love for the monarchy or in our love for those TV series I mentioned, or in that desire that our loved ones aren't gone forever, those longings cannot be met in those places that we reach out to. They can only be met in Jesus Christ. In the wonder of him building his people together as the King of Kings and giving you a place not because you deserve it or have earned it, simply because of his love for you. Now, it seemed to me that both ennobles in the most extraordinary way the smallest acts of service that you do in the midst of God's people. The smallest ways that you just express care and love become, in God's hands, in his economy, the most beautiful and glorious things. But that is also a challenging call, isn't it? Because it's possible to build your lives on things that will go up in smoke in the end. So I wonder, as you carry on celebrating this weekend, will you receive all the good gifts of God, including our King and the monarchy, as good gifts, but as temporary gifts, pointing to something in Jesus Christ that is better and lasting beyond all compare? Let's spend a few moments reflecting on what that means in our own lives. And then Ollie Huggins is going to come and lead us in our prayers of intercession.